Good afternoon, everybody. This is John Snell here at Bob Reeves Brass. It's so great to be with you wherever you're watching around the world. And I can't believe it. It's been 6 months since our last Q&A, and I have to apologize for that because we were on a really good roll there, having guest artists in, and it just got so crazy over the summer. But I'm so glad to be back, and especially with today's artist. We have a lot to talk about, so I'll introduce him right now. Dan Rosenboom is a mainstay in LA in the studios and the freelance world, and besides playing the trumpet, he also created his own record label, Orenda Records, that we're going to be talking about. He's been on more than 25 albums and released more than 60, I think, through his record label. This weekend, he'll be playing at the Angel City Jazz Festival, which has been named this weekend Orenda Fest because it's all of his label's artists for this weekend. And on Monday, you definitely want to tune in for this on the Bob Reeves Brass YouTube channel. We are going to be premiering his work Refraction with his trio that we're going to be talking about. That'll be on the Bob Reeves Brass YouTube channel. So we'll talk about that and all the other great things that Dan does. Studios, he plays with the LA Phil and the Hollywood Bowl Orchestra and subs just about everywhere. Studio work. Oh, but I mentioned he was on Star Wars. So we have a lot to talk about. And without further ado, let's bring in my special guest today, Dan Rosenboom. Hey, Dan, how you doing? Can you hear me okay?
Hey, everybody. Yeah, I hear you great.
Awesome.
Excited to be here. Thanks, John.
Well, it's so awesome to have you here and talking about trumpet. And before we get started, I want to our listeners, we already have people joining in from around the world.
Awesome.
If you're viewing and watching, you have two jobs. You have to let us know in the comments section where you're watching from so we can connect with you. And also, most importantly, we have Dan Rosenboom here for the next 45 minutes or so. So ask your questions about just about everything. So before we get started, though, Dan, can you talk to us about what you're doing this weekend, about the Jazz Festival?
Yeah, I feel very fortunate to be presenting 5 bands from my record label, Orenda Records, on this year's Angel City Jazz Fest. It's going to be tomorrow, Saturday, October 9th, from 5 p.m. to 11 p.m. here in Los Angeles. And it's going to feature over 46 musicians from the LA scene. We've got the John Hadamiya Big Band. We've got a wonderful collective called Bridge to Everywhere that features music influenced by cultures all over the world and performs music by all the various members of the ensemble. We've got the Kathleen Pineda Quartet featuring another great trumpet player, Chris Tyner. And then we've got guitarist and composer Alexander Noyce's band Noyce, which is like a crazy art rock, high intensity operatic kind of experience. And then I'll be closing with a quartet featuring pianist Joshua White, bassist Richard Giddens, drummer Mark Ferber, and myself. And we'll be reimagining a whole bunch of my compositions from throughout the Orenda catalog. We launched the label in 2014, and since that time, we're actually, I think, up to 92 releases, and we have several more on deck. So we're approaching 100 very quickly, and I'm saving number 100 for something special. So
yeah, so my bio's out of date. You're up to 92. That's incredible.
Yeah, it happens really fast. It's kind of crazy.
And so exciting. So Angel City Jazz Festival was at a website. People just Google that. What's the best way to, if they want tickets and stuff?
The best way to get tickets is go to angelcityjazz.com. It's angelcityjazz as one word.com, and they have a really easy link there to buy the tickets. You'll click on Orenda Records Fest. You'll see my photo that has me looking cool with a cornet and a trumpet and sunglasses along with the other artists that are there. And it's super easy to buy the tickets. There's student tickets as well for any students that might be joining in. And anyone can use a discount code, which is Orenda, all lowercase, ORENDA. And you can save 20% on tickets. So, be sure to snag those. They're probably going to sell out pretty quickly before the doors open tomorrow. But if they don't, please do come to the doors because the tickets will be available there as well. Awesome. Everything is going to be safe COVID-wise. We're requiring vaccination proof as well as masks while not eating or drinking and social distancing. And there'll be plenty of seating if you want to sit down as well as standing room if you'd rather, mill about and stand and go between stuff. So 5 bands, 46 musicians, 2 different stages, all amazing players. And then, we're going to just celebrate. So
what fun. It must be great to get back to it too. Cause we've been a couple of years.
It's been a very crazy couple of years and getting the chance to re-emerge with a big event like this is kind of a really special treat. So thanks to the Angel City Jazz Festival for that.
Yeah, and probably doubly so because it also all of your Orenda artists as well. So it's not just yourself featured, but other artists that you featured on your label.
Yeah, it feels very nice to be able to offer that opportunity to people.
That's awesome, and a shout out to Chris Tyner, who I hope to have on here at some point because folks watching around the world, he's from Bakersfield, which isn't, dare we say, a hotbed of jazz activity. Kind of in the farmlands here in Southern California. But he does some amazing jazz playing and trumpet playing. So it's really cool to see him featured in the jazz festival as well. So.
Well, and the other trumpets who are playing in John Hadamiya's big band represent some of the most killing young players in the Los Angeles scene. Ryan Deweese is going to play lead. Aidan Lombard is playing. Harry Ostrander is playing, and Rigo Velez are all playing. So it's a really cool section of younger players that are just crushing it. So awesome. There's a nice trumpet representation on the festival.
How cool. Well, thanks for sharing about that. And I'm looking forward to a weekend full of jazz. And while we were talking, we have people checking in both on YouTube and Facebook, the power of technology. We have folks checking in. From different places, Charles from sunny San Francisco, which is kind of funny. Here in LA, it's kind of more like San Francisco weather today.
Yeah.
We have Tom checking in from Tasmania, Australia. And Nathan, our good buddy Nathan Samuelson, who was also featured on the podcast, he's checking in from Canada. So, hey guys, thank you for checking in. And yeah, be sure if you have any questions for Dan, now is your time to ask. As these live streams go, people are always shy at the beginning, and then as we start wrapping up 45 minutes, hour into it, then all these questions start coming in. So ask your questions now, so we'll get a chance to get to them. We do have a question that came in from Mike. He got your boom mouthpiece, which
cool.
I failed to mention in the introduction. It's not like you're our artist and it's our mouthpiece that you're playing on. Something I should have mentioned since I work here, but
I figured it would probably come up at some point.
Right? Yeah. So Mike was asking. He got one, loves it, but he wanted to ask you what the process was like working with us and coming up with the model.
Oh man, it was such a joy and like how would I say enlightening and confusing process all at the same time. I for years and years and years played on a Bach 5C with a little bit of I think it was a 26 throat, but I wasn't really sure what it was. Never really thought about equipment, just kind of played. And then I found that the way my career went, I was having to do so many different things and cultivate, a really different sounds for different jobs and also my own creative work. And I felt just kind of boxed in and a little bit limited in the sonic range and the efficiency of the Bach. So I came up to Reeves to see if there was a solution. And Bob Reeves himself pulled out the D69 mouthpiece and handed it to me and said, "You should probably play this." And I tried every other mouthpiece that was slightly in the same vein. And after doing that, I came back to the original one Bob pulled off the shelf, the D69, and played that for a number of years. And then over the course of the pandemic, of course, we had some time to kind of experiment with things. And also, I was doing a lot of recording from home. So I started to notice, certain things about the sonic profile and the articulation and just the intonation and the efficiency of how it was playing and what, seemed to be really difficult versus what seemed to be working well. And, get in there with a microscope and look at the waveforms and see like how the microphone was picking up that mouthpiece at close range. So then I approached John and all the guys at Bob Reeves about the idea of doing a custom mouthpiece, like a variation on that. And then it was their suggestion that we do a signature model. And so what was cool about that is rather than just kind of doing an experiment and seeing what happened, we made the commitment early on to actually develop it to the point where we would want to share it with other people. And so we went through several different iterations of that, several different prototypes, where I would play. Brett was really the guy who designed the mouthpiece. So I would play for Brett. We would go back and forth, talk about what was working, check out what he was hearing on his side of things and what I was hearing and feeling on my side of things. And then, Brett would basically say, "Okay, I have an idea. Let's try this." And usually he wouldn't tell me what the idea was and just hand me the new version and let me play it and see what we thought. And, so after doing a few versions of that, we got real close, with the third prototype. And I was pretty much ready to call it. And so I called up Reeves and they said, "Okay, well, or Brett said, I've got one more idea I want to try." So we tried that, and that was the one that really kind of brought it into focus. And I think as far as the actual gear goes, I don't really know what the specs are, and I'd actually kind of prefer not to know because, you can always ask the shop what the specs are. But I do know that it's like the cup is similar to a D cup, but it's slightly modified. The D cup, in general is a little bit more conical, but not all the way, V-shaped. It's got a little bit of a modified entrance to the throat, uh, and then Brett designed a totally distinct backbore for it. So that's kind of how we zeroed in on it. And my hope was, we kind of figured out that the 6C rim was like the best combination for me in terms of feel and sound. But my hope is that it's adaptable to a variety of rims, so a lot of people can get use out of it and play what's comfortable on their face. Because I think the under part especially is really where it's really efficient, and that's kind of where the magic is for me.
Yeah, and that's your description of the backbore is really that's it. I mean, I talked to Brett about what the backbore is, and you're onto something when you can't describe the shape, because he really dug into that backbore and came up with something pretty cool.
Yeah, I really have no idea what it is, but it works really, really well. Like I find that whether I'm in the studio or playing in a brass quintet or playing in an orchestra or playing, jazz or, improvising other kinds of things, I've had enough chances to try it in all the different contexts that I work in, and it just does what I want it to do, which is really great.
Yeah, and we're so glad to have you as part of the team. And a lot of folks are already picking it up and getting similar results on it. So, and I should mention, because you said, you're using the 6C rim, and even you're kind of experimenting with rims still. We can make
Yeah.
any of the Reeves or Proviance rims with, the boom under part. Or if you use a Bach or something else, a Schilke rim or Monet rim, we can always thread that rim and build a boom underpart to it. So for those of you watching, so those are available from our website, also from your website, and then we have them available for trial as well. And if you're in LA, come on up and try one yourself here at the shop. So do have a question coming in. This one comes from Charles. So Dan, how do you choose equipment to allow you to do your best in your diverse range of performance? So, for example, Star Wars recording versus your quartet live, that sort of thing.
Well, really, I want to play the same thing as much as possible. Like, I'm actually not that into switching equipment, which is why we kind of zeroed in on this mouthpiece design. But even back in the day, I was still playing the same thing for everything. I just wasn't as happy about it, you know. But I'm not really into the idea of switching a lot. I mean, I do have like a sort of lead piece that if I really need to scream, I can throw it in. But I wouldn't pull that out unless it was a last resort. And other than that, I really don't switch in terms of mouthpieces. As far as horns go, usually when I'm playing in the studios or in the orchestra, we're playing either just like C trumpet or B flat trumpet, and whatever I'm kind of into at that point. I play Yamaha horns, and so I have a old Yamaha C I got from Jens Lindemann back in the day, and then my B flat is the Vizzuti Yamaha, whatever, the Gen 2, I think. But I pretty much play those for just about everything, and then piccolo and flugel when required. One thing that I do like playing a lot, though, in my own creative music is the Yamaha C Cornet that takes a trumpet shank mouthpiece. So I can use my normal mouthpiece with it, and I like that because it occurred to me that I often think in concert pitch. So improvising on it actually is very fluid, and because it's more cornet, well, it is a cornet. It's really fluid, moving around the horn. So that can provide some fun improvisational opportunities. And then I got this Van Laar quarter tone trumpet earlier through the Bob Reeves shop, and I'm still kind of learning how to be ultra fluid with the quarter tone, which is an extra valve. But that one has a little bit darker, rounder, smokier sound. So it's really nice in a small group jazz context as well. So that's kind of the main chunk of equipment that I use. I do have a Bobby Shoe, one of the new Bobby Shoe Yamaha horns that I do like for some, playing in small groups and commercial stuff. But honestly, it's it's kind of six of one, half a dozen of the other for between my two Yamaha B flats. So it's kind of just whatever I'm feeling at the time.
Awesome and great. Thank you for the question, Charles. That's a good one. And I kind of as a follow up to that, then. So I mean, that's the equipment side of things. What do you do, like routine wise or maintenance wise, to deal with all the diverse types of music you're playing?
Yeah, so I really, believe in fundamentals as, literally the foundation of everything. So most of my practice is dealing with fundamentals, a lot of Schlossberg, a lot of my own scale routines and flexibility stuff that I came up with. But it's really just about getting my trumpet playing to just be as responsive to whatever idea comes into my head as possible, um, so that approach works in any kind of musical situation, right? As long as you can imagine the style or imagine the sound that you're trying to create, if you've built enough of a broad foundation with your technique, then the trumpet will just do the sound that's in your mind, and that's really to me what the practice is all about. So most of my practice is fundamentals, and then I do a fair amount of free improvising every day just to connect my inner sense of melody with my flow on the instrument. Um, I mean, that's pretty much it. I mean, that's really the simplicity of it. As far as styles and different kinds of flavors go, it's really more about listening than practicing for me. So listening to as much music as I can get my hands on, and then putting that into the bank of ideas that you can draw on, whether you're reading music or improvising.
Oh, great advice. And yeah, I want to talk about improvisation here in a minute. I do want to take a break here and just because we do have some folks joining us a little bit late, and that's okay because we're going for about 45 minutes or so, and we are live here with Dan Rosenboom to answer your questions. It's great experience, great opportunity to ask him just about anything you want. I'm sure. I'm sure there's a few off-topic things we can not get into. And if you did miss the first 20 minutes or so of this, don't worry because this whole video will be archived on YouTube on the Bob Reeves Brass channel. So you can go back and listen to all the great stories and advice. So if you are just joining us, show us some love in the comments. Hit that like button, the subscribe button, all of those different things to keep this going. And let us know in the comments where you're viewing from. We already have Australia and Canada checking in. I'm sure there's some folks in Europe that are still, it's probably a little late there, but still up getting ready to go to bed, listening to some trumpet talk. So getting back to what we were talking about, Dan, is how did your improvisation develop? Because your style now is, I mean, like everything you do is diverse, but I mean, you do a lot of free jazz, if you want to call it that, and free composition, including one of the pieces we're going to premiere on Monday, which we'll get into. But did you start that way, or did you end up, take us through that?
Yeah. So when I was younger, well, it's interesting. I grew up playing classical piano, and then when it was time to join the school band, I picked up the trumpet because my dad had one that he had played in high school, and I taught myself for the first couple of years just trying to learn the band music by ear, and then I started studying with Wadada Leo Smith, who had just joined the faculty at Cal Arts. And at the time, I didn't know what a sort of heavy musician he was. He was, just like a wonderful, kind person. And he, took me through the basic stuff, Arbenz and even, got me into the Haydn trumpet concerto and some Corelli sonatas and stuff. But also kind of peppered in some just call and response improvisation in the lessons, which was really about ear training and just playing what you hear. And we got a little bit into his compositional style, which is very unique, but I was pretty young at the time. And then after that, I got pretty serious about following an orchestral path, and I started studying with Roy Poper in high school, and was trying out for all the youth orchestras and honor orchestras and stuff like that, and ended up going to Interlochen and studying with Stanley Friedman for a year, and then going to Eastman and studying with James Thompson. And the whole time up until about my senior year of college, I was really single track mind. Like I wanted to be Bud Herseth, and by the time I was a senior in college, I sort of started to feel like I was bored of that idea, and I just kind of was curious about other ways I could make a career in music, other kinds of music I could check out. And so when I left college, I was really searching for other things. I didn't know what those things would be, but I was curious, and I was really lucky to get to study with people like Vinny Golia and Miroslav Tadic and Larry Kuntz at Cal Arts, in addition to Ed Carroll at Cal Arts, so that I could, really get into just stuff I'd never done before. Vinny really opened my eyes up in terms of free improvisation. And at the same time, I was learning a lot of Balkan folk music from Miroslav and a little bit of jazz basics from Larry Kuntz. And I got into this band that did like Balkan music meets metal and free jazz. And that was kind of the first place where I was gigging and soloing regularly. So I kind of immediately got thrown into, performing in different modes and time signatures improvisationally. And then from there, over time, ended up getting more and more involved in the jazz scene in LA, not so much playing, traditional jazz or standards or anything like that, but just getting roped into people's creative ensembles and, challenged to do different kinds of things. And so I had a really sort of zigzaggy pathway into improvising. And so I think it had this sort of dual benefit of keeping it all very fresh, and also kind of, helping me cultivate a sound that was really different than a lot of the more, jazz oriented trajectory that you hear, So I feel really grateful for the kind of winding road, and it's still somewhat like that. But at this point, I'm most excited by the spontaneous creation of music between a band, which is, free improvising together, but really doing so with like a large structural concept, so that you really are kind of co-creating something that is, exciting and relatable and immediate.
It's amazing how exciting that is. That's a perfect segue into Refraction that we're going to be premiering on Monday. Before I get to that, a quick shout out to Trumpet Vinny Shashelski, who's actually the latest guest on the podcast, Nashville, institution in Nashville. I think he's been on 5,000 or 6,000 recordings. So he's watching. Hey, Vinny, says hi, John and Dan. And just quick shout out to Positive Trumpeters Worldwide, which is an awesome Facebook group on there that he's one of the founders of. So he's watching. I always say success leaves clues, and it's pretty cool to see how many former podcast guests are actually watching to see what the other pros are doing. You wonder why guys like yourself, Dan, and Vinny are successful, as they're figuring out what all the other players are doing.
Oh yeah, well, you're an eternal student. You just keep kind of trying to gain more insight and information and perspective.
Yeah. And so it's really cool to see, and we kind of have a club, the podcast club. So back to my question. I want to bring up Refraction, because I don't know. I've never been. I'll be honest. I've never been a fan of what we consider free jazz. And a lot of times when I've been in situations where they say, hey, let's play free jazz, and it's just like, well, no, you can't play changes, and that's why you're playing free jazz, But I realize it's those kinds of players that give that kind of spontaneous creation a bad name. And man, when we recorded Refraction, that's premiering on Monday. I mean, you came in with, was it Billy Moeller on bass and Anthony Fung, and I mean there wasn't even so much as a warm up or a hey, let's do this. You just started playing and put down an album basically, right? I mean, isn't that, you had a few things worked out? How did that?
Well, I mean, we didn't have anything worked out. Basically, when you start to find the players that you really vibe with, it's like in any ensemble, there's chemistry involved as well. So you find players that you feel like you can be on the same wavelength. And Billy and Anthony are both composers as well. So I know that we all kind of can, bring a compositional perspective to free improvising. And I think, ultimately speaking, that's really the idea. We're trying to make a spontaneous composition, right? That feels like a composition. So the same things that are at play, motives and motivic development and, contrasting sections and, really trying to key into, like, if, Billy is great about digging into a vamp or a vibe, or, even if he's playing free, it's much more like harmonic than, you might expect. And so really keying in a listening sense to what the other guys are doing and making sure that anything I'm doing is related and relevant to what is happening in the rest of the band. And I think ultimately that's what makes it really work, is that chemistry, that sense of shared trajectory. And that band had also played with a saxophone player, Gavin Templeton. We did a quartet record that actually was all compositions, with soloing and whatnot. But so we had established a sense of communication and vibe and everything. So when I hit the guys up about getting together for this recording, that was sort of like the edge of your seat, exciting part of it. All right, let's just go and see what happens. We figured, like, if nothing else, we'd probably get 15 minutes worth of usable stuff that we could edit together. But, as it came out, it's totally unedited and just playing start to finish. And it worked out really beautifully.
And so we can all see the results of that on Monday over on the Bob Reeves Brass YouTube channel. It's premiering on Monday, and of course then it'll be up there for posterity's sake for you to watch. It's a 25-minute piece in 4 sections, and really diverse playing. You're using some electronics on it, some of the parts of it you're not, and a wonderful feature for the whole trio, because each of you have a time to shine. But it's really that, like you're talking about, that communication between you two. As me sitting behind the camera, was just incredible to see in person. So I'm glad that we get to share that. So thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for the opportunity.
And so we actually got another quick question, because I could ask questions all day. I love this. Question is coming from Tony from the UK. We're going to get a little controversial. He's asking if you do any mouthpiece buzzing, and if so, why? And do you agree with it? Obviously, if you do mouthpiece buzzing, you're going to disagree with people who don't do it. But what's your take on buzzing? Does it work for you? That sort of thing.
I do buzzing, and I came up doing buzzing. Roy Popper is one of the real stamp experts, and then studying with James Thompson, he really has a complete buzzing approach as well, with the buzzing book and his whole philosophy. So I really got it from the source from those two teachers, and came up buzzing. And I now, in my own playing and my teaching, I feel there can be some pretty strong benefits from mouthpiece buzzing if you do it in a particularly conscious way. Ultimately, I think that the thing we're trying to achieve anytime we're practicing fundamentals is getting the airstream to really drive and float the tone, and make sure that or sort of kind of lead the various elements of your technique through the flow through the instrument. Now, a lot of people kind of go back and forth about whether buzzing is valid or effective or not. And I think a lot of it ends up having to do with the difference in length of pipe and resistance that comes from a mouthpiece versus a whole trumpet. And I think that there's some legitimacy in that observation, but I think when you're buzzing the mouthpiece, you're focusing in a sort of more minute, controlled kind of way that then you can kind of let open up when you get into the horn. So all by way of saying, at this point, I'm not particularly dogmatic about it. And at this point in my own playing, I've found that it works better for me if I warm up on the trumpet and then use mouthpiece buzzing at different times in my practice to kind of dial in focus and clarity in the aperture.
Interesting. So it's not like a warm up, because I think a lot of teachers teach it as like a warm up to get things going and your ears, trained and things like that. So you use it more as like a kind of a fix it kind of device, kind of tool.
Not even fix it, just kind of like I'd use it in conjunction with some slow flexibility exercises that I do. So I'll do them on the trumpet, and then on the mouthpiece, and then tongued on the trumpet, and kind of go back and forth. One of the things that I always thought was great about Jim Thompson's approach was that you do the exercise on the mouthpiece, then you do it on the trumpet. You do it on the mouthpiece, then you do it on the trumpet. And you're always going back and forth, so you get this really immediate sense of how the two relate, even if they're a little bit different, And I mean, I definitely felt like, I came out of studying with Jim Thompson being a very efficient player and able to play most anything that was put in front of me. So it's got to work on some level, but I do understand that people have a variety of opinions about it. And I think that ultimately speaking, you find what works best for you and your concept and how you approach the instrument. If you're twisting up your face to try to make the mouthpiece buzz work, that's probably not going to be very beneficial, but if you're able to kind of get that vibration happening in a clear way, you could develop a lot of control and flexibility on the mouthpiece. So it really ultimately is personal, I think.
That's exactly it. And of course, like everything, I make more of the conflict between the buzzing, non-buzzing than really.
I don't know, man. I've seen some pretty contentious stuff on Facebook going back and forth about that.
Right. Well, and I got another shout out to Positive Trumpeters Worldwide, because on Facebook, you're not allowed to, everyone, like what you said, you find out what works for you and you do it. I mean, common sense. So that's the whole thing. So speaking of that, let's take a little break here to welcome all of our new viewers. It's always how these live streams go. We're on here for half an hour, and then people start seeing, oh, Bob Reeves Brass is live. Oh, it's Dan Rosenboom. I'm going to join on. So if you've just joined us, don't worry. You've missed 40 minutes of great trumpet talk, and it'll be archived. So you can rewind. You can watch this whole thing when you're done. It'll be up on the Bob Reeves Brass YouTube channel. Also, if you're just joining us, show us some love in the comments. You can click share, click subscribe, click like, wherever you're at. Share this stream with your friends. It helps us to be more visible, and all of those algorithms, that are controlling everything. So show us some love in the comments. Let us know where you're viewing from. We can see it live on the stream. And of course, we have a few minutes left. Ask your questions of Dan Rosenboom, a wealth of information and experience across all different types of playing. Which brings me to my next question, Dan. I mean, of all the different things you've done, and you said your career zigzagged. I mean, was there any moment where you're sitting with the LA Phil or sitting in a session where you're just like, this is it, like something that just really was a special moment for you?
Oh, sure. I mean, there's been a lot of those actually, and usually they have to do with reaching certain milestones that I could have imagined when I was younger. There was a time, I think the first gig I got to play with the LA Phil at the Hollywood Bowl was, one of those moments, because I grew up going to the Hollywood Bowl in the summer and kind of imagining oh, I want to do that someday, and then you're doing it and it's like, oh, I'm doing it. The big one for me was getting to play on Star Wars with John Williams, because for me, when I saw Jurassic Park as a kid, it like combined my two favorite things ever. It was like dinosaurs and music, and I had just started to like kind of get good enough on the trumpet that I could like sort of, recognize movie themes and play them and stuff. And then I heard that score, and when it went to the Dollar movie theater in my town, I like saved up my money and went a bunch of days in a row. And every day I'd come home and I'd try to play the theme on the trumpet, So it was like really direct. And then later I found out, when I started studying with Roy Popper, that he had played on the soundtrack, and I thought that was like the coolest thing ever. And then when they re-released the Star Wars movies, I was, just at the beginning of high school, and then the prequels came out, I think, like my junior year of high school. So I remember being in line and saying, I was pretty serious about the trumpet at that point. And I remember being in line and saying to my friend, we were going to see, I think, episode 1, I was like, man, okay, so if they do one of these every 3 years, and, they end up doing all 9 of them, like the books say, or whatever, then by the time that, the next trilogy comes around, I might be old enough to be involved, and wouldn't that be cool? And then, lo and behold, episode 7 came around, and I by some miracle was called to be in the section. So I got to play in the section, for all 3 new Star Wars films. But that first recording where I was there, I was just having like goosebumps, and going like is this real life? Like, pinch me, like am I dreaming? And then there's been other times, in other contexts, like getting to play with my band at the Monterey Jazz Festival was a huge one for me. Or getting to take my other band, Burning Ghost, to Europe and play on some jazz festivals over there. That was huge, as well. And it's usually those firsts, that like the first big thing you get to do, that you kind of dreamed about doing. Those are the moments that really stand out, as like, oh, this is it.
That's exciting. It gives me goosebumps just you talking about. And the kids these days don't know. I mean, you had to go to Jurassic Park and go to the movie theater. Now you could just stream it on, as much as you want to learn the parts. So I mean,
yeah.
No,
I when I was at the Dollar Theater, I rode my bike there like several days in a row and like paid the $1 to go see the movie.
Right. Yeah, I mean, that's determination for you. That's so awesome. And for those of you watching, one of the first live streams we did was a May the 4th Be With You live stream, and we had the whole section doing a Q&A with John Lewis, and it was Barry Perkins, Dave Washburn, yourself, with Jim Grinta and Rob Shear, right?
Actually, that same group, Barry Perkins did a cool arrangement of a Star Wars suite from the new movies, and we did like a video with all of us
That's right.
playing. It's pretty awesome. So if you look it up, that's on YouTube as well.
Yeah, we'll have the link to that and the link to the Q&A, because a lot of great information. And yeah, Barry, like during, there's people that shut down during COVID and just, it's fine, you do what you need to do. Barry just took on a whole second life being a video editor. He did some incredible stuff during the COVID shutdown.
Yeah.
So, and that Star Wars trumpet thing is really incredible. One last thing about Star Wars I want to talk a little bit about, because this was interesting for me to learn during that Q&A, was, I mean, each movie, I mean, there wasn't like one session, right? I mean, it was like spread out over a year or more, right?
It was really unusual because it seemed like for all 3 films, they were developing the movie and cutting the edit and, doing, I don't know, whatever they do in post-production, in conjunction with recording the score. So for the first one, I think we started in January, and we had recording sessions peppered through almost the whole year. I think we finished the last one sometime in November, and it came out in December, and they were all kind of like that, and where you'd have like 2 or 3 at a time, and then a month later there'd be another few, and and I think it was a testament to how much the directors and the producers respected John Williams as an integral part of the storytelling, because they were making the edits with the music, and I thought that I've never seen any other project do that in my time doing soundtrack work.
Yeah, pretty amazing. Yeah, like you said, a testament to John Williams and the producers to the, could you imagine Star Wars without the music? I mean,
No.
yeah, we got our good buddy Keith checking in, the pilot. Keith, good to see you on here. He wants to know, Dan, when will we see the return of Plots?
I don't know. That band started to fizzle mainly because half the band lives in Ventura, California, and half the band lives sort of scattered through the LA area. And it just, a few people had kids, and then it just got really hard to find a way to get together. But I feel like it'll happen at some point. At some point down the road. I don't have any plans on the books for it, but it would be really fun.
Well, I mean, you were mentioning it, album number 100 for Orenda, so
That's true.
maybe a reunion.
Although that may already
no
be
pressure.
set.
So also, and we got a couple more minutes here. We'll wrap up. But it's question. You see, we're running towards the end, and questions start flying in. Matt from Australia is asking about your warm up. We talked a little bit about your warm up, but if you're having a bad day, is there any tips that you do typically? Because if, let's say, you were blowing really hard the night before with your band, and you have to go in and play something with a chamber group or something like that.
Yeah.
Is there any tips that you can give for finding your center again?
Absolutely. For me, the way I think about trumpet playing is we have basically four main elements to our technique. We've got our airstream and support apparatus. We've got our embouchure. We've got our fingers. And we've got our tongue. So in getting back to a place of centeredness and balance and focus, it's really about making sure all of those things are working in conjunction with each other. So for me, something I got from Malcolm McNabb when I was younger was really basically, using soft breath attacks and bends as a way to kind of get the responsiveness, get the embouchure responding to the airstream, rather than, trying to force a buzz or something, And then with the bends, just getting some elasticity going in the chops and in the way that our airstream meets the resistance of the horn, so that you're really kind of calibrating your body to the instrument and finding a symbiotic connection. So using that as a starting point, some soft breath attacks and bends, whether you do the half step down or whole step down or whatever. Well, I also do bends where I keep the note the same, but finger the half step or whole step above, which is basically, like a sort of advanced bend. I sort of use those interchangeably to kind of like sine wave around the center and, find that spot where the chops just respond. And usually speaking, through a combination of that and slow arpeggios, just really focusing on vibration and sound, I'm able to if I'm really spread out from the night before, or I've had a rough week, or hard gigs with my band or anything, that can usually get me pretty quickly back to a centered, focused place where I could play whatever I have to play.
Awesome. Great advice there, and great question, Matt. And then I think we have time for about one more before, and then we'll wrap up here. This one comes from Japan. So we covered the globe basically from from Europe all the way over to Tasmania and Japan. This one's about recording equipment, because you had mentioned earlier about during COVID shutdown we started doing a lot more home recording, but also as a running your own record label, you have a lot of experience in recording, obviously. So can you talk about what like microphone and equipment you use, and any tips for recording the trumpet specifically at home?
Yeah, sure. So I use a Royer 122V and usually an AEA RPQ2 preamp. And that combination I feel like works really, really well for the trumpet. Any of the Royers, the 121 or the 122, 122V, those are all really great on the trumpet. I love the AEA microphones as well, the N8 or the R84 or the R44 especially. Those are all fantastic. And I have a variety of other microphones in my mic locker that I'll use sometimes depending on the flavor that I want. But I'm also recording a lot more than just trumpet at my home studio, because prior to the pandemic, we set it up so we could record bands in here live, so I've got, a variety of options and, for different instruments and stuff. But for the trumpet, I find like that pair really works well. The main thing about learning to record yourself at home is it's much more about microphone placement than it is about the specific microphone that you use. Different microphones respond differently depending on how close or far you are from the source, whether you're on axis or off axis, like if you are playing straight into the microphone, or if the microphone's slightly tilted above the bell, or something like that. And they're all a little bit different, so you got to kind of experiment. And it also really depends on the room, like how the reflections in the room happen. So you got to kind of, take the time to experiment and find the sweet spot for you. Typically speaking, with the Royer, I'm about slightly off axis, slightly above the bell, pointing down, and about somewhere between 1.5 to 3 feet from the microphone, depending on how up close and personal the sound has to be. I don't usually like getting closer than that on a ribbon microphone. On a dynamic microphone, it can be a little different. You can change the sound by getting a little closer. But the best way to start understanding microphones and placement is to really dig into the polar pickup patterns of the microphone, meaning like the shape of the pattern that of sound that it sees. So you've got a variety of different ones, everywhere from bidirectional, which is the figure 8 pattern that most ribbon microphones have, to cardioid pattern, which is, a lot of condenser microphones have, to omni, which is, totally 360 degrees open. And then if you start imagining those pickup patterns as three-dimensional, almost like they were balloons coming out of the microphone, you can start to wrap your head around where you would want your, like if you put the microphone where you'd want your head to be in relation to the sound. And then the pickup patterns also help, understand what is reflecting back on the microphone and how the microphone sees that. So all those things go into play, but I always tell, especially students, you can get a great sound with, not that expensive of a microphone like an SM57 if you experiment with the placement of it, and really, figure out where it's going to, make the sound, beautiful and get the resonance that you want, versus just kind of like looking at a picture of how somebody else did it and copying that, because the room changes it, the horn changes it, the player changes it, so you gotta take the time to experiment.
Great advice. I mean, that's like a class right there in recording, so that's awesome. And exactly, and just like choosing your equipment for the trumpet, the mouthpiece and the horn, I mean, you have to play what works for you and experiment. So that's the same is true with the microphone and the recording setup. So that's so awesome. And I was going to wrap up with that question, but we had a last minute question come in, and it's from my good buddy Morris Northcutt, who again a former podcast guest and Q&A guest, and he just released an album, Tonata, which is absolutely gorgeous trumpet playing. So Morris says, Dan, I love your playing. You've done so many albums. Do you have a process to select the songs for your albums? So what does that look like for you?
For me, it usually starts with who's going to play on the album. So I kind of, and this is true for compositions as well, I kind of start from the people that I want to work with and let the compositions or the album emerge from what I think might be interesting as an intersection between those personalities. So like and some of the albums I've done are, as we were talking earlier, fully improvised, and some are much more composed. And that sort of depends, again, on the players that I'm using. Like, am I going to get the best performance out of this player if I give them a complicated chart, or am I going to get the best performance if I give them, like a pictograph and some instructions? I mean, and it really goes to just understanding the creativity of the musicians that you're working with. How they work best and how you can get the best, performance out of them and the most interesting thing. So to me, it really just all boils down to the people. And so, like I said recently in an interview, it's like you mix and match the personnel and the ideas come out like popcorn, because it's like, you change one variable and it's a totally different band and it'll sound totally different. So you could write different music or just play a different way, and it kind of makes it this never-ending well of possibilities.
That's so cool. And thank you again, Morris, for the awesome question, because I love, some insight into that creative process and starting. I don't know, it's just like writers or any other creative. Like you start with that blank canvas, and
Yeah.
So yeah, it's to know that you start with the personalities involved, and you're kind of okay. Yeah, who does this good? Who's going to draw this out, or I can draw this out of this person, and how are they going to interact? I mean, moving the pieces around. So
Right.
yeah, really exciting. Last question's mine, and then we'll wrap up here. Except I forgot what it was. I was too busy reading the comments.
Perfect.
Well, I'm thinking of my question that I was going to ask. Right, that's always the hardest one. Is the one I was going to ask. Where can folks find out about you? And since we have new people joining, if you could plug the Angel City Jazz Festival again this weekend and let people know about that.
Yeah. You can find me at danrosenboom.com. That's boom, not bloom, but everything's up there. Or I mean, I needed to update it a little bit, but all this stuff is there. And I got a YouTube channel as well, as Instagram and Facebook and all that. It's all just Dan Rosenboom. Sometimes it's Dan_Rosenboom, but if you just type the name into the search, you should be able to find it. As far as this weekend goes, next or tomorrow on Saturday, we have a big 5-band, 46 musician showcase for my label, Orenda Records, happening at this place called 2220 Arts and Archives. It's hosted by Angel City Jazz Festival, and the doors are at 5 p.m. and it'll go all the way till probably 11:30 p.m. And it's just going to be an amazing, epic night of music. And you can find all that information on my Instagram or on orendarecords.com. That's ORENDA records.com. And yeah, I mean, if you're in the LA area, definitely come check it out because it's going to be epic and amazing.
Awesome, thank you for that. And while you were sharing, I remembered my question, the most important question, because I want to know. You mentioned earlier you do so much listening, and you have such diverse playing. I'm curious, who do you listen to? Like, who's inspiring you right now? What other musicians are you listening to that you're pulling ideas from or inspiration from?
Oh, it's just everything all the time. I mean, basically, the way that I come across music and the way that I experience music now is usually through friends again, like somebody say, oh, have you heard this? Or, like I used to be super into this record or whatever. And so I get that and try to get some adjacent things from the same artists, so I can get like a perspective on where they're coming from. And so I don't know, it's just all kind of random and all over the place right now. But I will say that I'm almost always, again, inspired by the music that my friends are creating. So a lot of it, it's just like stuff I'll hear tomorrow at the festival. They'll come away, having experienced, especially live, like having experienced something new and different, and then ruminating on it and thinking about, how I want to relate to that. If I want to relate to that. Yeah, I mean, there's never any lack of inspiration. It's just, it's just kind of all over the place. I wish I had more of like a, oh, check these guys out, but it's
No,
kind of,
it's well, and it's an inspiring answer because you're pulling from everything, and I think the key thing you said is from your friends, from your colleagues. You know,
yeah,
it's everyone's got a little gem that they have to share, and you're building on that. So that's awesome.
yeah. When I was younger, I used to obsess on individual records, but now it's just like I listen to a record a couple times and I'm on to the next one, and it's like a, conveyor belt of like intake that goes by. And so I don't necessarily like say like, oh, I'm super into this one. It's just like, oh, I heard a little thing here and a little thing there and a little thing there. It's like then it kind of all stews together in your brain and it's like, oh, okay, well, I have this different idea now.
That's cool. Like a sponge,
Yeah. Yeah.
musical sponge. That's so awesome. And our buddy Jose Ortiz just joined in. So with that, we'll wrap up because Jose is here. But thanks for checking in, Jose. Dan, it's been awesome as always. We planned on going 45 minutes, and we've gone over an hour. So how awesome! Thank you for spending your afternoon. I know you're crazy busy. Getting ready for the Jazz Festival this weekend. So thank you for spending some time this afternoon chatting with us. We'll have to do this again at some point.
My pleasure. Thanks for asking me, John.
So and we'll see you soon. And let me just wrap up here. So thank you all for joining me. It's been 6 months, so I'm a little rusty trying to figure out which buttons to push and which questions to ask. So thank you for bearing with me. But we have some more Q&As coming up. So next week, Philippe Schartz, who is another really popular podcast guest, he's from the UK. Well, he's not originally from the UK. He's from Luxembourg, that small country over there in Europe, but he plays with the BBC Welsh Orchestra, does all the Doctor Who studio sessions with the orchestra over there, plus all of the live performing. And he's actually on tour right now, so he'll join us next Thursday. That's October 14th. I think that'll be at 1 p.m. Pacific time. But we'll put out, hit that subscribe button, follow us on Facebook, so you'll get all the notifications for these Q&As and all the other cool stuff we do. So we have Philippe Schartz next week, the Thursday the 14th, and then the following week on the 21st, Thursday the 21st, will be Vinny Shashelski, who actually chimed in today from Nashville. He was the latest podcast guest and got a lot of experience recording at Muscle Shoals and thousands of artists in Nashville from all types of different walks of life and musical idioms. So that'll be October 21st, and then the schedule will go on after that. So make sure, again, hit that subscribe button, hit that like button so you don't miss any of these because it's a wealth of information. One last thing about Dan Rosenboom again. DanRosenboom.com is his website for all of his information and on social media. Angel City Jazz Festival this weekend, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. So go ahead and check that out. And on Monday, the video premiere of Refraction. Work with Dan Rosenboom, Billy Moeller, and Anthony Fung. 24 minutes of incredible music, all recorded live and basically uploaded to YouTube. So check that out. That'll be premiering on the Bob Reeves Brass YouTube channel on Monday. So thank you so much for joining us. Stay safe, stay healthy, go out and practice some, get some of that practice in, and look forward to seeing you the next time. Bye-bye.